I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Okay, back for perhaps the last time. Two of my favorite guests. Maybe you've seen me on their podcast, or you've seen them online, or maybe you've seen their comedy. The History Hyenas, Chris Distefano and Yannis Pappas, have decided to end their podcast. And I have to say, the episode with me in it I had such a fun time. I encourage people to listen to that. Jay, maybe we should air that one also.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Not only do they talk about, why they decided to end. And it's always difficult to end things that are at a high point, because I felt they were going strong and they were at a high point. It's always difficult to end in those times, but they made their decision for some good reasons. And we also discuss what's happening in the world that made them such a success. This really is about peak performance. Like, in a world where everything has basically gone crazy and there's no gatekeepers anymore in any industry, books, movies, podcasts, being an entrepreneur, there's fewer gatekeepers than ever. They give good advice for someone who wants to start off being a content creator, and it really applies to any industry. And of course, these guys are as funny as ever. So here's History Hyenas.
Yeah, let's do it.
I just want to mention a friend of mine makes interesting glass sculptures or whatever. So I got, as a gift for some friends, he made the coronavirus molecule, like a glass version of it. And so sent everybody, this coronavirus molecule. And then immediately, like, my kids all got coronavirus. So we suspect maybe he had it on the glass. But
well, you know what? Him, Amazon, Zoom, those are people with businesses that do not want this pandemic to end.
But one business that did end, and this is Yannis Pappas I'm talking to, one half of the History Hyenas, has been on several
formerly
times
known
before.
as, like Prince, formerly known as the History Hyenas. Formerly.
I'm wearing my History Hyenas t-shirt.
It's a collector's item now. It's like having a GameStop t-shirt.
So let me ask you a question, because you guys did such a great job. It was one of the few podcasts I would listen to. Maybe I listened to 4 podcasts in total in my life. And History Hyenas, I was a regular listener to. It was hilarious. It covered history. It was educational. You guys had great rapport. So it's hard to know when to end something. Like, I've ended podcasts before, and it's a big decision because you have an audience. what did it look like? When did you first start thinking you would end the podcast?
Well, we always knew that we were here for a good time, not a long time. We always said we were a podcast on the run, and we were here for a good time, not a long time. So we thought it would be hilarious if after I did Rogan and our podcast jumped up as high as it could, we decided, you know what, let's end it on its peak. Let's go out on a bang. Let's get the people talking. And boy, have they. They are not happy with us, but we went out on top. We went out on top, and it's hilarious. And just
I'm
like
not happy. What am I going to listen to?
Well, you can go listen to reruns. You can listen to Hey Babe with Sal Volcano and Chris. You can listen to Yanni Long Days. You can listen to Chrissy Chaos. We're still on the internet. We haven't died. I mean, we're only here for another couple decades anyway. So, I mean, money doesn't mean anything. You know that, James Altucher. How many times have you gone broke?
I might be going broke right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, James. And you know what? I'm sorry I'm late, but you know what, James? Fuck you. I'm not doing anything for you anymore. You don't even text me back.
No,
Well,
I was okay. I was just
he was
explaining to guys.
kidnapped. He was kidnapped by Palestinians, and we finally were able to negotiate his release.
Okay, so no. Here's what happened. Around mid-November, this hasn't happened to me in like 14 years. I got totally burnt out. And
He got kidnapped. What he means is he got kidnapped by Sean Donnelly for money because Sean Donnelly's out of work. So he knows if he kidnapped James Altucher, his sons would pay the ransom. And here he is back. And Sean Donnelly's a rich man moving to Austin.
No, my kids would never pay the ransom. That's why that story is wrong. But here's what happened. I don't know. I think maybe I got so much hate from the New York City is Dead article and a couple other things happened. And I just literally, like, one day I switched off and I stopped going on the internet completely. I don't even know where my phone is. I just stopped everything. And
Good.
to the great frustration of everybody I know, including my wife and kids, all I've been doing for 3.5 months, or maybe a little more now, I've been playing chess online for 15 hours a day, minimum 15 hours a day. That's all I've done. I don't know if it's so good. So I went to therapists to figure out, like, is there something I could do to stop doing this? Like, I literally did nothing. I did no writing. I didn't go on social media. I have no idea what's in the news. I barely know who's president. I have not left my house. And all I do is play chess, which is why, and Jay, audio engineer on here, has been getting me to get back into the podcasting so that at least we have some podcasts to release. But I did get better at chess, though. So there's that. But I apologize. I literally have not even emailed anybody. Nobody. I haven't contacted anybody.
So what do you say to those people who think that you and Jerry Seinfeld faked this whole thing and your people are behind coronavirus?
Oh, well, we could be. See, I'm a bad Jew, so we could. For all I know, the Jews could be behind coronavirus, but I have no idea because they don't tell me anything. Believe me, they don't like Jews who go broke pretty regularly. We're kind of kicked out. Like I'm not allowed at Rosh Hashanah services. Like, there's no price I could pay that could get me in.
No, are you broke again? You're not broke again.
No,
James,
no.
You're not broke again.
No, not at all. But it doesn't help things when, like, literally, I stopped everything. I stopped every activity I was doing. But I wanted to get back in touch and apologize. And I was even going to call you guys beforehand, but because of my 15-hour-a-day chess addiction, I did not give myself the free moment to call you guys to tell you before the podcast that I've just been burnt out.
Well, I told Chris not to worry. I knew you were okay because I was still getting emails from my avails to do shows on the 6 train. So I knew that your club was still up and running, and I was available.
I haven't talked to Donnie Zolden in 4 months.
Yeah, well, your club has moved inside of a train car.
So this is what happened when I left for a few months.
And as long as you're still giving the 500, as long as you were still giving us the 500 a month every month, we were like, everything's fine.
Yeah, as long as that 500 came in, and I did a couple of those sets, as long as I said somebody swiped me in and paid for my subway token, I was good.
There you go. Did you do some of those sets? Were they good?
I did. The spot pay was a swipe.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, Stand Up New York is keeping in the news.
Yeah.
They are.
Okay. What are you guys up to? What's happening? What's going on with History Hyenas? I was just asking Yannis, why did it end? It's hard to end things.
Yeah, I think, by the way, sorry I was late. I was doing a thing for Inked magazine, which is a tattoo magazine. I have 2 tattoos. So I don't know. I mean, I got there and they thought I was somebody. They saw me. There's a thing, Instagram account called like Tattoos and Shit or something like that. And they thought that it's like a thing, that an account that puts fake tattoos on people and then posts it to Instagram. And they thought I had those tattoos. So I just wasted everybody's time for an hour. But, you know, so sorry. So that's the thing I was in. But I don't know what Yannis, I came in at the end when Yannis was saying, we just wanted to end on top as the 277th ranked podcast on iTunes. And that's exactly what we did.
And is that true? I always think there's a good reason and a real reason. I feel like Yannis gave me a couple of good reasons, but it's very hard to get the real reason out of people. Like I have teenage daughters.
Let me just cut you off real quick. Because keep what you were going to say, but I'll say, if you want the real reason, it will be available on patreon.com/Bay Ridge Boys, which is still up, for $1 million.
Yes.
Now I'm still considering the Tim Dillon episode, but I
do it.
That will also cost you $1 million.
You should hike
which is
that
about
price
what
up.
Timmy makes a month on Patreon.
Yeah. So I mean, do you feel like? Okay, well, I'm obviously not going to get the real reason out of you guys, but do you think that's true? There's a good reason and a real reason? Like if one of my teenage daughters says, "Oh, Dad, I'm going to the library. I need to study," that's a good reason. But the real reason is there might be boys at the library. That's the real reason. And then you never get the real reason out of anybody.
I think,
Right.
I think, because I mean, what the reasons are always, they're always just a bunch of things that don't mean anything in a couple of years. I think things end that are meant to end, and they were always inevitable. I'm not this person. I believe in fate. It's like certain things have energy that they're here for a short time. Certain things have energy that they're here for a long time. It's like when you're with certain girls, if you don't get to a certain age where if you start and the sex is really good, that relationship's not going to last. If you start with someone and it's a little boring and it builds a little bit, that's the one, that comfortable misery is the one you settle down with. So it's like, it's different vibes. Everyone knew the History Hyenas was a chaotic, kind of show from the beginning. It had that frantic energy. Hyenas don't live forever. We're not turtles. We're hyenas. We got eaten out on the Serengeti, and that's just what happened. I mean, hyenas go down. We live fucking bold. We live quick. We're by any means necessary. We cackle, and then we get our ears chewed off, and we get hazed and killed by stronger, more feminine, bigger pseudo-penis hyenas who take over the clan. And a couple bitches came in and they turned us into a female podcast. There will be a History Hyenas 2 that will be done by Sam J. and Amy Schumer.
Wait, so do you feel like there were other podcasts you were competing with that, were overwhelming to you, or?
Yes, the English Cheetahs. The Social Studies Pumas.
So what? So now you're going to do the Long Day podcast, which is just going to be you, and Chrissy's going to do Chrissy Chaos and Sal and Chrissy.
Correct.
And it's called Hey Babe with Sal. Yeah, with Sal and Chris. Hey Babe.
And
then I got my Chrissy Chaos. Yeah, and then Yanni's doing Yanni Long Days. And we both have Patreons now, solo Patreons, but we also still have for $5 a month, patreon.com/Bay Ridge Boys to binge our old stuff. We're screwed in Jews just like you.
I always knew you guys were Jewish. Everybody says, no, they're not Jewish. And I'm like, they're closet Jews. But so also you have the True TV show. What's that?
That's called Backyard Bar Wars, which is just me hosting a show with 2 friends that are building bars in their backyard. So I got to go to LA for a couple of months and do it. And yeah, dude, it's just fucking, a lot of the fans are just, calling me a cuck and a sellout for True TV. And the beauty about social media is it doesn't exist when you don't look at the comments, So it's just like, a lot of the fans that are yelling at me about stuff, I took a look at their profile pics and I'm like, oh, they haven't made good decisions either.
Yeah, tell me about it. I'll bring this up, I promise, for the last time, but this New York City is Dead article, I probably had 1 million people tweet shit about me. And yes, if you look at the profiles of all these people, they're 100% losers. And
right,
except for Seinfeld, who I think is not a loser. Right. By the way, I really enjoyed his book. Is This Anything? It was a great book about comedy. Seinfeld, speaking of the ending of History Hyenas, Howard Stern once asked Seinfeld, he said, you were offered $100 million to do a 10th season of Seinfeld because the public wanted to see a 10th season. Why didn't you do it for $100 million? You turned down $100 million. And Seinfeld told him, Howard, that's the reason. The public, by definition, is not in show business. So why would I want to do what they want me to do? I'm the show business guy.
Right.
They're not. So I want to do the opposite of what the public wants me to do. And he's already made the money. So, and I thought that was a very inspiring thing. You have to keep to your artistic integrity.
Yeah, he's spoken about that a few times. I really respect him for that. He pitched the show the way he wanted, against what they wanted. He got his friend Larry David in there. He always said that, like, anything he got hired for, he hated because it wasn't his. And so you got to give Jerry credit, man. I mean, that show was not meant to succeed. It was a mid-season replacement. Everyone thought it was going to be a failure. That's why they gave it a mid-season replacement. He hired Larry David, who was fired from SNL, was 40, living on his parents' couch, basically is the George Costanza character. Not basically, is. And did the show that he wanted about nothing. So when he pitched it, they were like, what are you talking about? And so they picked it up because they loved him, and it became the best show in the history of TV. And then, of course, Larry David, who was a fired writer from SNL, became this iconic comedian who had maybe the best cable comedy of all time. So I give Jerry credit for that. But I will say this. He's only done 2 specials, Jerry. So stop telling people to do their fucking time. It's not 1995. I'll do a 3-hour podcast, and that's what it is. It's not about being tight anymore. Grow up. You're a millionaire. You're disconnected. New York is over. I'm team fucking Altucher.
And by the way, Andrew Schultz, who I remember the day after
my show.
The day after my article came out, I had an hour-long discussion with Andrew Schultz. He refused to believe that New York City was dead, and he kept going over every possible argument. And now he just moved to Miami. So
yeah, he couldn't accept it. He couldn't accept it because he didn't get a chance to colonize it yet, as he said.
Yeah, so we'll see. We'll see what happens to him. But I don't think, and I want to segue into comedy and history, Hyenas again, but I don't think Jerry Seinfeld's show, I don't think Seinfeld was about nothing. And I see that there's this thread through his career that's very interesting, which is he actually is very meta interested in comedy. So Seinfeld was was the first of a genre of shows about a comedian developing material. That's really what the show was about. And then his book, Is This Anything, that just came out. It's a book about how he developed his routine since the 70s. So it's the most fascinating book I've seen about comedy. And then he did that documentary in like 2002 about, the process of coming back as a comedian. So his whole everything he was very successful at in his career was about the process of making comedy, which is interesting. And I think that's what people loved. And then it became a genre on TV with like Louis and the Jim Gaffigan Show and some other shows. And Chris, I saw you mentioned officially on one of the shows that, oh no, it was in your video about Soul Joel's that Jerry Seinfeld called you last April.
Yes, he called me last April and said some nice things, and then he told me I could text him bits, and he wanted me to text him bits and get together for coffee. And then every text I sent him has been left on read since last April. So I really just, I don't know what else to say, because I'm just like, hey, I've sent him bits. I've said, let's get coffee. And the kid never wrote back. So, but it was a good call. And I have proof that it happened. Jasmine filmed it.
Well, it's not his fault. Jerry is too busy saving New York.
Yeah. Jerry was figuring out all sorts of, he was bringing out all this like depression level insults like putz and schmuck and things like that to call me. He was working on his material about me. So
yeah, no, he's been out there hitting the streets, canvassing, supporting small business. I see Jerry out there. He's making sure single-handedly that there's only 1 to 7 machete slashings a week.
Or people thrown in front of subways, whatever.
Yeah.
But, and Yannis is thinking of moving out of this city. What are you thinking of doing? Chris, you're going to have to go to LA.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go to LA for 3 months, 3 months, but I'm not leaving. I'm just going to stay in New York. I'm just going to stay, I'll go do that. And then I'll just come back to Brooklyn. There was a part of me that was going to move to Long Island, looking at houses and stuff. But now I think I'll just wait it out. I'll just wait a little bit, stay in Brooklyn, do this thing I got to do in LA, and then, see what happens. But I'm not. I love New York. I think the house prices in New York are going to have to drop, right?
Yeah,
You're the expert, James. What
yeah,
do you think?
they're already dropping. They're probably, well, it's hard because some areas of Manhattan you just can't sell. There's no buyers and there's no renters right now, so it's hard to value a nice apartment. Like students and young people are still moving in, but I mean, there's like 500,000 people have left Manhattan since in the past few months.
And what makes that so problematic, right, James, is that they're high income people, right? That's what makes it
high income
problematic.
people. I mean, New York City is losing on property taxes because so many people have left. They're losing on sales taxes because there's no tourists. They're losing on income taxes because people are leaving. And then they're going to have to fire MTA work. They're going to have to fire police, teachers. There's garbage all over the streets because they've already been firing garbage collectors. And then fewer people will want to move to the city because of it's like this death spiral down. You have less money, less services, less people, and then less money. And I was saying to Yannis earlier, 1 out of 4 people in New York haven't paid rent since March, which means all the mom and pop landlords are going broke. So we have to just wait and see. Like it'll eventually something good will happen, but we don't really know yet the extent to which things are bad at this point. It's still a wait and see.
What about Bitcoin? I just bought Bitcoin. Was that stupid?
I don't think so because there's something like $19 trillion has appeared on the planet since last March. Like there was previously $150 trillion of currency on planet Earth, and now there's like almost 20 trillion more than that. So when there's so much money out there and so many dollars, there's a fear that there's going to be inflation, that the dollar will be worthless. It's like if you're everything, if there's too much of something, too much of a good thing, then chances are the value of it goes down. So I think people are sort of breathing a sigh of relief that at the very least, they could hide their money in Bitcoin and protect against potential inflation because Bitcoin won't suffer from inflation. So I think some people are betting the farm on Bitcoin. I would never do that. But if you think there's a 2% chance that Bitcoin will take over the world, then put 2% of your money in Bitcoin, which is roughly like what I do. So we'll see. It's been doing well. But
what about Dogecoin? What about the other one, the other coin, Dogecoin?
Well, that's a scam. I mean, it's not a scam. That's a fake coin. Like that guy. So I know that guy. So in 2018, I was selling a Bitcoin related newsletter where I was explaining Bitcoin to people and making recommendations and so on. So a lot of people didn't like that I was doing this. And it was one of these things where I was spending too much time on social media. So one Saturday night at like 3 a.m, I said, if anyone has a problem with me, call me right now. And I put my number on Twitter and he called, the Dogecoin guy, the guy who started it. He called and I explained to him, this is why no one understands Bitcoin. So I'm writing a newsletter about it and I'm working at it. So I'm charging for it. And he's like, oh, okay, it's just your ads are a little bit spammy. And I said, yeah, because if I just said what I just said to you, nobody would buy it. You have to say outrageous things to get people's attention. But he admits it's a fake coin. It's not a real coin. And he's making like $1 billion on it now. So it's crazy.
All right.
But so what else has been going on? Like how's history? You did Bernie Madoff. How's Bernie Madoff wild? I haven't watched any podcasts either, so I haven't done any preparation for this podcast. How's Bernie Madoff wild?
I think Bernie Madoff was one of our funnest episodes. It was, I think it was the last full episode we did before we have 2 more interview episodes, one with Ryan Long and then Carly Aquilino, and then we have our finale episode. Our finale episode was one of the funnest episodes we've ever done. We read off some of the rest of our wild Patreon names, and we really went out. I mean, people are going to love our finale. It was old school Hyenas fun, and it was just one of our best episodes is the finale. So tune in for that. Bernie Madoff was wild. He deserved to not be put in prison for how good he was. I mean, people don't appreciate how long he was able to get away with convincing people he was able to continue to make 1% while the market was crashing. I mean, and he was able to convince some of the richest people in the world to give him their money, and he made them want him so bad that they competed. He created a whole illusion of exclusivity. I mean, hats off to his sociopathy. I mean, let's give this guy some fucking credit. He is the Michael Jordan of thieves, and we put him in a fucking cage. The disrespect for someone who has a skill level that high has really been the beginning of the down spiral that America is in, because this whole country is a crime, and he should be elevated, not put in a cage. And that's my point, James.
Well, you could be right. You know, he says from prison, he can't understand why his investors aren't thanking him instead of trying to put him in prison.
I mean, do sociopaths ever admit or see their flaws? Give the guy some fucking credit. He's loyal to himself. And at the end of the day, you're born alone, you die alone. He's a loyal guy.
Did I ever tell you, I met him once, and I asked him for money because I was raising money for my own fund. And of course, he was the biggest hedge fund in the world and was a respected, famous hedge fund manager. And so I go up to meet him. I had a mutual friend. I go up to meet him. He gives me a tour of all his offices. And then we sit in his office. He had a glass office in the center of the whole place. And he says, okay, so what can I do for you? And I said, I'm trying to raise some money. And he said, listen, James, I like you. You could come here and work here anytime you want. And you have a job, just ask. But I don't know where you invest your money. I don't know what you do with it. And the last thing we need here at Bernard Madoff Securities is to see our name on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. And so he did not give me money. And I walked out of his building. He was in the Lipstick Building on 52nd Street. And I walked out of his building and I was so depressed about it. I said, how can I ever compete with Bernie Madoff? He's got $60 billion hedge fund. He's got great returns. So I literally started shutting down my business then on that rejection. And people were calling me as I was leaving, and they were like, did you ask Bernie Madoff if we can invest in his fund? And I'm like, no, I didn't ask. I'm sorry. And then later, all of those people denied asking me that, even though, why would I make that up? And then,
how brilliant.
And then a year or so ago, I called the jail that he's in, and I said, I want to have Bernie Madoff. I said, I know him. I want to have Bernie Madoff on my podcast. And so they sent a message to him. This guy wants you on his podcast. And he said no. And I'm like, this guy's always rejecting me somehow, even from prison.
Well, I love the fact that he was involved in American history's biggest heist, and he made you feel like insecure about your investments and what you were doing and who you were. I mean, he was the ultimate con artist. He was the ultimate. He was so good at making people feel insecure and making himself so coveted. And it was just all distractions. He created so many distractions. It's like that old expression, like, you always lose to the Yankees because you can't stop staring at the pinstripes. I mean, that's what he did. He did it to everybody. And it's just an amazing, that confidence really throws people. And you go, and the amount of attention, this is what we learned from doing the episode. He would call everyone on their birthdays. He would come to their funerals, their families' funerals. He was always available. He would go to their children's recitals. He made himself the least suspected person to do this. And that's why he was able to get away with it for so long. Everyone knows about the financial things he did, but the actual psychology of it was the most fascinating part for me, because sociopaths always pretend to be the opposite of what they are. They don't show up and go, hey, I'm going to steal you of your money, or else you wouldn't give them your money. So they pretend to be your best friend, the nicest people. They shower you with compliments and flattery. And that creates all these blind spots, and people fall for it every time. And those people are showmen, and the world is their stage, and they're no different than magicians or mediums or comedians. We're all full of shit, and he should be revered.
Oh, you know what? You know what, James? Too. One of my friends' uncles is the judge, Denny Chin, who gave Bernie Madoff like 150 years in prison, and he said that it was even hard for him to give him all that jail time because he just liked him. He was like, I just liked him sitting there. It was just like he seemed like a nice guy.
I mean,
That's
Hitler
insane.
was very well liked. I mean, he was very followed.
Hitler was a vegetarian.
He was a vegetarian. He was a dog lover. At one point, he was a child. So the thing is, these people give the world such entertainment. They give us things to talk about. We know they're ultimately going down because they chase their own tail because they're like the Joker. They don't know what to do with it. But while they're here, let's celebrate the journey.
Yeah, I mean, those are if you could argue these are the most influential people in history. All
Yes.
the heads of every religion, people like Hitler, Madoff, and I say influential in that they changed the course of history.
Yes.
And for mostly for worse. But
But funner. But it gives us something to talk about. I mean, nobody talks about Clara Barton. How great and brave. She used to pull people off the battlefield, talking history, hyena shit. That bitch would single-handedly go out there on her own and fucking pull injured soldiers with blown off legs off the battlefield and tend to them right there. She's founded the Red Cross. Nobody gives a shit about that bitch because she was boring.
But you know what, though? You just made me think, like, when you first said Clara Barton, I had no idea who you were talking about.
Right.
And
I didn't even know we did an episode on her.
We did it.
Well, so yeah.
She's too fucking boring. What are we going to talk about? Oh, she was a good person. She helped people. No, let's talk about the biggest heist in American history. People want to watch Goodfellas. They don't want to watch a fucking church documentary. Let's get real.
But I feel like there's going to be a hole in the podcast universe now. Basically, there's hardcore history that Dan Carlin does, which is a brilliant history podcast, and there's some other history podcasts. But there's not going to be a funny, energetic.
What are you talking about, dude? Girls Gotta Eat are still up and running.
I don't know that one. I'll have to check that out.
All our fans who like History Hyenas will love that. It's the same fucking good time.
All right, I'll check that out. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. Now, let me ask you this. You guys were so funny on the podcast. It made me think about, what's the difference between stand-up and just, you guys were just insanely funny, like just riffing on your podcast. And I know, my guess is you made attempts, or you are transforming some of the things you said on the podcast into your material. But stand-up material feels so different than kind of the energy and humor you guys were using on the podcast. Like, when you do stand-up, both of you, do you just keep using the same material, or have you been able to kind of incorporate this other stuff, this new stuff, into your stand-up?
I've been going back on the road. I've had some dates, have some dates coming up. And I got to be honest, it just feels like you just are doing the podcast still, but live. That's what it feels like. And, like, that's just how I felt. Like, I was like, oh, it's all podcast fans. So it's almost like, yeah, you have your material and stuff, sure, but a lot of them have heard it already. They've heard everything you've said because they listen to hours and hours of you a week. So I think, for me at least, it's been like, I'm doing like more long form, telling stories and stuff on doing my stand-up, but it's like some of the old bits that I have, I still do them. And it's almost like, like when you sell tickets now, it's like the people are there for you. So it's almost like not easier, but they laugh at a lot more shit. They laugh at even your cadence,
Yeah. So like, what's an example where you're just telling a story from the podcast or a story from history on stage, as opposed to just a canned piece of material that you've done 1,000 times before?
Like all this stuff that we would say about like the Chinese virus and stuff like that. I just do that on stage. I just yell about, the Chinese virus on stage now, and it's turned into a bit, but we first started talking about it on the podcast.
And so do you go onto the stage with a plan, or do you figure you're going to riff and see which direction the audience is leaning?
I always know where I'm going to start and I'm going to end. In the middle, it's whatever happens. But I always at least have to, how I'm going to begin and how I'm going to end is always, I have a very good idea of what those two bits will be.
You said something to me very interesting once, which is that you go on the stage and I forgot exactly how you said it, but you said your first job is you're going to try to charm the audience. You used the word charm, which was an interesting word. And then you'll kind of decide when to break into material and when to just keep playing with the audience and so on.
Yeah, I think for me, like I always think about stand-up, like of course it's very, very, very important to be funny, of course. You can't, be a good stand-up and not be funny, but I think likability is probably the most important thing in live performance, because it's just like, if you're unlikable, it's just like your jokes can be as funny, but they're never going to hit. Like people with likability get away with being less funny, That's always that's what I thought. Colin Quinn told me that in 2010.
And Yannis, you've done some stand up as well lately. Have you been kind of taking material more from the podcast or your old material, or what have you been doing?
Yeah, nothing from the podcast. I've only done stand up 6 times in the year. And what I'm generally noticing is, much like when cable TV came in and disrupted what people's idea of stand-up comedy was from late night sets, which was their only frame of reference before cable television, I almost feel like the internet is doing the same thing, and podcasts are doing the same thing that cable TV did to the late night set when, Def Comedy Jam came, Comedy Central. Now we've had this most recent incarnation, again brought to you by technology, that has sort of broken another wall down and gotten fans to know, like Chris said, their favorite comedians' cadence. They listen to them for an hour, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week. They get to know everything about them. So they sort of have become fans of the band, or a person as a band, the way, Kings of Leon fans used to follow them. It's not like, oh, let me go to a comedy club and see who's funny. That feels more disingenuous now, when previously it didn't, because there was no other frame of reference, nothing to compare it to. Now it feels more disingenuous because it's inorganic. They didn't find you on their own. You weren't recommended to them through a friend. There's not that thrill of discovery. There's not that intimate knowledge of the person's perspective and cadence and takes on things. So I think comedy was going through a change before the pandemic, and I think the pandemic has accelerated that change, where fans have fallen even more in love and become more dependent on the comedians. We get messages all the time. Hey, I've done 3 tours of duty in Iraq. You guys got me through PTSD that was triggered from this pandemic. You guys got me through me losing my job and stuff like that. So it's a mixture between like morning radio, stand-up comedy, sketch comedy, personal stuff. It's a new incarnation that you can't compare it to. It's not morning radio. It's not, it's this thing where they fall in love with you, your story, your humor, your take, and they want to hear it. And they want to hear it every week, and they follow you like a band. And everything else, although many people refuse to acknowledge it yet, is irrelevant. It's a thing of the past. It won't be written about in history because it's been done. And this new thing has come, And much like new things, people have a hard time adapting to new things, and most people don't. I mean, evolutionary theory of Darwinism is not the strongest survive. It's the ones who adapt to change the best. And if you deny that change, you will die because it's not going backwards.
Right, because you look at like not only the fastest rising comedians right now, but the fastest rising podcasts. I would say there's you guys, there's Tim Dillon, there's
not
Andrew
us
Schultz.
Anymore. Yeah,
not you
individually.
Anymore,
Yeah,
you individually. Tim Dillon, Andrew Schultz, and right from the beginning, I was on Ryan Long's train that I thought he was going to be brilliant, and his boys cast or whatever he calls his podcast is great. His sketches are great. His comedy's super great, and you guys are like the this generation's, it seems like, fastest rising comedians, podcasters, whatever.
Well, I'll even explain to you. I experienced these moments where these two eras clash. It's like when we had Bill Burr on our podcast, and I love Bill to death. He's one of my favorite comics. I like him as a person.
And he trashed you. He was merciless.
And I'll explain to you why. Bill comes from an era where, much like that scene in Batman with the Joker, you had, where the Joker breaks the stick and says, "We only have 2 spots. You guys fight it out." Bill comes from an era where there was gatekeepers and you had to really sharpen your wit to get a spot at the Cellar or Caroline's, to get one of the few half hours that were handed out, one of the few weekend sets at a club, one of the few half hours Comedy Central was handing out. So these guys would sit at a table and really sharpen their wit and test each other, much like soldiers when they're bored, like old Spartans would wrestle and fight and play fight. And just like animals do, because they live in a harsh terrain. So they got to keep their chops sharp. That era is over. Comedians are not competing with each other anymore. Getting something means nothing. It's irrelevant. People don't care because they didn't discover you organically. They're not in love with you. So now what is advantageous to the comedian is to get on another comedian's podcast. Share your fans. That's what the internet kids do well. Tag each other in videos. There's enough room for everybody. These are two diametrically opposed perspectives. And so what Bill was doing was typical of his generation. You got to be tougher. You got to fucking haze these people. You gotta be, it was just like competition. So he was treating me like competition in a friendly way with a wink, but that era is over. That table is irrelevant. It's from a time where the business was different, where you had to impress an SD or somebody. Nowadays, you look at the people who are the biggest or the most relevant, let's be honest, like you said, they're people who have an organic following that just keep growing by going on other podcasts, by having their show organically recommended through friend and friend. So it's two eras that are not the same. One is still hanging around because, of course, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, although you try. But you'll see that those comics will get a little bitter, a little hostile towards change, as they always will, because it's their raison d'etre is being threatened.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you look at this is happening in every single industry. There's no reason, for instance, to even go on stage at a club. Maybe 100 people see you, maybe 200, maybe 300, who knows? But when you do a podcast, if it's a funny, good podcast, you're going to have somewhere between 40,000 and 200,000 people or more, in Joe Rogan's case, much more, listen in some form or other, whether it's through iTunes or on YouTube or whatever. People are going to, so much bigger audience, it almost doesn't make sense to spend 8 hours a night doing club comedy. Although, that's a specific kind of skill set too that's important. But, after so much, I don't know if it's relevant to do. I don't know. And the other thing is doing Netflix specials. This is to your point of the gatekeepers. I don't know anybody who watches comedy specials on Netflix.
Yeah, no, it's the last person who probably blew up from it was Ali Wong, Nate Bargatze. Everyone else is already famous. Yeah. Or they fill some sort of diversity checkbox where, which for them, that's what they have left is sort of, comedy is making history. And you see that in all, you see it in politics, you see it in entertainment. You have to make history in some way. This is the first transgendered official assistant health advisor to the president. This is the most diverse cabinet. It's like everything's about making history. It's not really about being funny. That train has left the station. So the people, I think, are forced to go online to to actually make themselves laugh, because that stuff on TV feels canned because there's only so much you can say. And that's antithetical to what comedy is. I mean, the class clown was funny not because he said what the teacher wanted. He was funny because he said the wrong thing at the wrong time, or the right time, depending on how you want to look at it or phrase it. So, there's an agenda on television. You represent corporations and advertisers, and they don't want to have their dollar threatened by anything you say. So there's a real void that's filled online where people who are going through normal people want to laugh as therapy, and they're not going to find that in abundance on television anymore.
So Chris, why True TV? Because I don't know the full ratings of True TV because those ratings are so low they don't even publish the ratings. Your podcast probably got 10 times as many views as every show on True TV.
Right.
So the question really is, does TV still have that allure because it's television, because it feels like a big deal to do a TV show?
The only reason why I said yes to the True TV show is because it would be in LA. A lot of podcasters have left, so that, it's one of those things where it's like, fuck, but there's still a lot of big podcasts in LA, and I could go on a lot of the LA podcasts. It's really good money for, first time show. So it's like money's money, and then I, have the podcast with Sal, and if with Impractical Jokers, nobody's more famous from TV than them. So I was told, that True TV, we'll try to position it in a lead-in with the Practical Jokers, and maybe that works, maybe that doesn't. But I also wanted to do it because the whole TV show is sponsored by Miller Lite. So, my team, my agent kind of felt like, hey, might as well take a chance. You can potentially be like a spokesperson for a Miller Lite thing, and all the while never giving up podcasting. I'll do twice as much podcasts and internet stuff and never changing anything. So I think that's one of the, I think you can do both. You can do it all. I'd rather have it where it's if you shut me down one place, wherever you look, you'll see me kind of thing, So that's why I did it. I understand when people say why they don't want to do it, and I get it all. I understand it all. And, as Yannis mentioning, the Andrew Schultz, the Tim Dillons, they're extremely successful without television. You can't even deny it. But I'm not trading one for the other. I'm just doing both.
Yeah, and I like the idea of diversifying opportunity and diversifying old school, new school, because even when someone says, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm not necessarily impressed or anything, because that's still just one job. It's not really safe, and it's not really a pathway to success. It's the real pathway, I think, is diversifying your opportunities so you could handle more risk, because one could fail, as you say, and the others could succeed. And you're giving yourself more chances for success, in fact. And it's just more interesting that way, instead of just doing one thing.
Yeah. People were tweeting at me, oh, True TV, you're going to get canceled. I'm going to try to cancel you. I'm like, good, cancel the show. It'll make my Patreon go through the roof. I don't fucking care. It's one of those things where it's yeah, you don't want to go through stuff. Of course, nobody wants to feel bad about their work and shit. But it's I look at the opportunities yeah, dude, I know how important podcasting and the internet is. I'm not stopping. I put out content every other day and podcast episodes all the time. And what Yannis and I did with Hyenas, I would never trade one for the other. I just believe there's enough hours in the day to do both.
And
he's right. It's great to diversify opportunities. It is great. And as comedians, we just we have this thing now where it's I don't know why. It's not right that they come after us, but they do. They just come after us like we have any importance. And it's an unfortunate thing that whenever a comedian starts climbing up, these fucking people from the internet, which is ironic because that's where you're a little more free, they come after you and try to dig something up. I don't even know if Kevin Hart could have a career now if he got caught saying what he said and had to get fired from the Oscars. They come after all of us. They've come after me. I'm just not big enough for anyone to care. And that's the only thing that really protects you, is not being big enough to care. And then, as you see with this country singer they got him drunk on the street. His career's over. He said, he was saying the N-word. He's over. It's just it's just done. They get you. And then it's a minefield out there of these trolls, because I just don't think there's a lot of jobs and everyone wants to be relevant. So it's it's scary. There's all these piranhas out there.
So you said earlier, implying that if you want to have a successful podcast, and this is really true for a successful career in anything, you need to be able to say something new. You can't just copy everybody who's come before you. You need to have like a unique voice and a unique perspective, whether you're a salesperson, a marketing manager, a podcaster, a comedian, a writer. What would you say to someone who's young today and thinking of starting a podcast? Like, how could they start?
Move to China and surrender.
Yeah, well, maybe that can be developed into a podcast. Like, just imagine every episode as they try to surrender to a different person in China. So while they're always applying to like Wuhan University to be a student there, so they can learn how to do what the Wuhan people did.
I approach Chinese people in the street like this now, and I just go like this. First, I ask, "Are you Chinese?" Because you got to, I don't want to walk up to a Korean or Japanese and they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, that happened organically where I had to ask. So I go, "Are you Chinese?" And then I just do this, and a few of them have put cuffs on me.
Well, see, they're already here. They're already ready for you.
Yeah, it's over.
So what would you say to someone who's brand new, starting a podcast and doesn't have a clue?
I would say the same thing when it comes to a TV show thing, whatever your idea is. If you're having fun doing it, if it works, that's a thing that'll happen probably once or twice, depending on how talented you are, how diverse your talent is. It will only happen one. Like look at Seinfeld. If it wasn't for his show, he'd be Brian Regan or something. Still make tons of money on the road and corporate gigs, but he wouldn't be the icon he is. It happens once or twice or three times tops in your life. So whatever feels the best organically and people respond to the best, keep doing that because you're lucky to have it.
But it's not just talent, right? Both you guys have spent a lot of time and effort developing your skill. And in the podcast, you developed a skill, which is a combination of, having a particular approach to history, looking at history in an alternative way, and then making it funny and hilarious. Like this was not just talent. There was a skills that you developed. How could someone go about thinking about those skills? Do it
just like stand-up. Just do it.
No one's teaching the latest and greatest because by definition, it's the frontier of podcasting or comedy or whatever. What did you guys do to develop skills? And I understand you said do it, but how did you know if you were good or bad? Like, how do you get feedback? How do you work on the parts where you're weakest?
I think I personally think really, like Yannis said, you only, especially with any type of comedy, any form of comedy, you just have to throw yourself into the fire and fail a lot. And I think through failing, you see what works. And if you're naturally funny, then you don't really have to try to be funny. That's the thing with comedy, at least, is I think you either kind of have it or you don't. So, people will bang their heads against the wall and why isn't this working? Well, there's a business part of it. Don't get me wrong. There's a huge business part of it, but it's like, with podcasting or stand-up, I kind of just feel like, hey, man, like you keep failing, figure out what doesn't work. But if you're naturally funny, then you'll eventually figure out the things that really work for you and work for your show, and you keep going. And I think for a podcaster, somebody brand new, I would go after a niche audience. I would make your thing as specific as possible to not get caught in the web of people just talking about nothing. You be very, 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 very niche. Like, even if people like, well, there's no audience for a podcast just talking about guitar strings or whatever. It's like, do that podcast because you'll find the 5,000 people in the world that love that shit and love talking about that stuff. And if you can get them to give you $10 a month for extra bonus content on Patreon, you'll make yourself a millionaire.
So you're doing 3 new podcasts between the two of you. What's your new podcast about?
I have one podcast. You can find me, Long Days with Yanni. It's me examining sort of the trending stuff, going on my rants, giving you my perspective. I got patreon.com/Yanni Long Days where I give a bonus episode a week. Also, all my characters, all that stuff's going behind the paywall. If you're an old school Maurice fan, Mr. Panos fan, any of my new characters, Derek, Luke St. Simon, and Sean Terry, all those videos I'm going to be shooting. I'm doing them all behind a paywall at Patreon. And that's what it is, a mixture of characters, stream of consciousness, and just it's cool because I'm working with my old buddy, Jesse Scatoro, who I had initially started a production company. We were about 10 years too early, more than that, actually. And we had a studio and everything. And so he does a lot of changing of the green screen and tells the story as I talk. Whatever topics come up, the green screen kind of changes, and he handles all that. So it's just a fun podcast, and I hope people check it out.
And Chris, what's your 2 ones about?
So one, I have Hey Babe with Sal Volcano, which comes out every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And that's just me and Sal just being silly and telling stories and being fun. And just, it's just really Sal's and I guess, our friendship on display. It's kind of just like really like an hour of like, just forget about whatever's going on in your life kind of shit. Like forget about, the pandemic. We'll never talk about anything in the news. Like it's just literally storytelling with Sal and I. And then Chrissy Chaos, which just started, it's going to come out every Tuesday at 11 a.m. It's me talking with Homeless Pimp, who used to be the producer of Hyenas, is doing it with me, and he's off camera, and him and I just kind of talking. I kind of quote, I talk to him when I can, or like, when we find it interesting, well, like he'll get on mic, but mainly it's segments. I'm doing the first segment in my podcast is called Anxiety Tuesday, where I just talk about mental health and what things I'm doing in mental health and what I think, for the week, like a mental health tip, and break it down, all comedy. Then the second segment is about history. It's called Christopher Distefano, where I tell you something about history that I've learned, or, 15-minute little mini segment of what I like about history. And then the third segment is the 48 Laws of Power, where for the next 48 episodes, I'll just talk about a chapter from the book, The 48 Laws of Power. And then at the end, I just fucking, have some kind of stupid sign off.
You should, by the way, not only an excellent book, The 48 Laws of Power, and so much history in it. Like every page is like an entire semester of history, but Robert Greene's an excellent podcast guest. You should get Robert Greene on your podcast.
I was thinking if it's successful after like the 10th episode, maybe, or 15th episode, if it all works, I'd have him on. I'm going to call, I would text you to have him on, but you don't fucking text me back.
No, I'm back. I'm out of my burnout. I think I'm crossing my fingers. Jay doesn't believe me, but, and my wife doesn't believe me, but.
So what happened? Did you have you had like a real breakdown? What happened?
No, I just stopped doing anything. I literally would wake up and go to my office in the morning, and I would say to myself, okay, I'm going to write something today because I haven't written anything since November. And then I'd say, I'm going to play a game online of chess first. And this would be like at 7 a.m. The next thing I know, it'd be 10 p.m. at night, and I'm still playing online chess. And that's happened every single day.
Is that the good reason or the real reason?
That is the real thing I'm doing. I actually don't know the reason why I'm doing it. I think it just started, and I just haven't been able to stop. But
James, you got divorced, and we know you got divorced.
No, but I'm sure she's probably considering it, because she'll say, hey, can we go out to dinner tonight? And I'll say, sure, I'll be ready in like 5 minutes. And then 4 hours later, I'm still playing chess online. And I play these like just 1 minute games where it's just me and the other person around the world. We have 1 minute each, and then we lose. But we'll see. I've been trying to limit myself lately and get back into doing this. So we'll see what happens.
Wait, listen, I love everybody on here. I gotta go. Thank you guys. Thanks for having me. I'm sorry I was late.
No problem. And for everybody listening, check out Chris and Yanni's new podcasts, Yanni Long Days, Chrissy Chaos, and Hey Babe with Chris and Sal. So I'm sure they're gonna be great. I'm looking forward to them. Good luck, you guys.
All right. Thanks, James.
Talk to you later.
Thanks, James.
Entresto, sacubitril valsartan tablets, is the #1 heart failure brand prescribed by cardiologists and has helped over 1 million people with heart failure. It's a prescription medicine that treats adults with long-lasting chronic heart failure and works better when the heart cannot pump a normal amount of blood to the body.
Don't take Entresto if pregnant. It can cause harm or death to an unborn baby. Don't take Entresto with an ACE inhibitor or aliskiren, or if you've had angioedema with an ACE or ARB. Don't take with aliskiren or within 36 hours of taking an ACE inhibitor. The most serious side effects are angioedema, low blood pressure, kidney problems, or high blood potassium. Angioedema is swelling of your face, lips, tongue, and throat that may cause death. If it causes difficulty breathing, get emergency help.
Ask your doctor about Entresto. To learn more, visit support.entresto.com or call 833-446-6699. For pricing, visit Entresto.com/cost. If you can't afford your medication, Novartis may be able to help.